We don't want to demonize the binge eating. We want you to realize the binge eating is not about food, and it's never been about food. It's been about creating safety, a sense of control, or escape when life just becomes too much.
Hello and welcome back to Healing and Growing Hand in Hand podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Tickle, and our guest today is Dr. Jessica Newkam-Helms. Right? I said your name right, didn't I?
Yes, you
Yes.
did. You nailed it.
Oh, good. And we were talking just before we started recording, and I am really excited about this topic today. But she's a licensed clinical psychologist, and some of the things that we're going to be talking about today are binge and emotional eating, which I used to always use those kind of interchangeable, but we're going to find out that's not true. And she's going to share about the connection between trauma and emotional eating, the difference between emotional and binge eating. And then this one's really interesting. Understanding the purpose of binge eating and how it actually is trying to help us. So thank you, Dr. Jessica, for being here.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I'm excited to talk about this. I talk about it all day long with my clients. And so the more ears I can reach, the more I can help. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the clarification because if I think I know what the difference is, I think I was more an emotional eater than a binge eater. And it was something that started when I was probably 11, 12 years old.
Yeah, that is actually really common. And so it usually starts in like pre-adolescence. For some of my clients, it has started earlier, but pre-adolescence and teen years are really common. So especially for women.
Yeah. And, what was interesting is at the time, and I share this on my podcast, but I didn't understand what I was doing. I had no idea. I didn't understand the link between the food, why I was doing it, right? But certainly the food and my weight. I didn't put those together. And what complicated it even more is I had a mom who was really skinny. And I had a
Yes.
mom who loved to dress me up, and I was really cute when I was little. And when I started putting weight on, guess what? I wasn't so cute anymore. So she got even more vicious, which I'm sure other people have dealt with as well, right? Which just complicates the problem. So I just wanted to share a little bit of my story and, so that the listeners can understand. I know what this is. I understand what this feels like. And to this day, I've gotten a lot better about managing it, but it's still there. So tell us more about it.
Yeah, it is definitely a journey. I have my own experience with binge and emotional eating as well. And so anybody that I welcome into my life, professionally, especially my clients, I feel like it's really important for them to know that I get it. Like I know exactly what it means to like throw your hands up in the air and say like, what on earth does it mean to eat normally anyway? Like I have no idea. Right? Like food's always on my mind. I can't stop thinking about it. I wake up in the morning promising to be, quote, good. Right. And then like 10 hours later, I'm like face first in a bag of Doritos.
Right.
And it's like, what the hell happened?
Yep.
Right. And then we go to bed and we feel like crap about ourselves and our body. And we say, okay, no more. I'm going to do better tomorrow. And then the cycle repeats, and it's vicious. It is vicious and it's all consuming. And so, yes, I'm happy to speak more about it. And I'm wondering if maybe we should start with the difference between emotional eating and binge eating, so we can do some clarification. So. Okay. All right. So a couple things to keep in mind. We are all emotional eaters. Eating in general is an emotional thing. And I'm going to come back to that. Actually, let's talk about it now. So think about like when you were born, right? Obviously, you don't remember when you were born, but if you have kids or if your listeners have children, we know that like when babies are upset, they have two ways to be comforted, to be soothed. And those two ways are food and touch. So when a baby is upset, when a baby is dysregulated, it's offered the breast or the bottle, or it's picked up and held by a caretaker. Right. And so we are brought into this world learning that food is used for soothing purposes.
That's true.
So it's wired into us from the very beginning. And one of the things I often tell my clients is that, if you come home from a hard day at work and you're upset about something that happened at work and you go to your partner and you say, I'm upset, I would really like a hug, right? We would never tell that person, like, it's not okay to ask for a hug when you're upset.
Right.
So why would we tell somebody it's not okay to use food occasionally when you're upset, right?
True. Right. Yeah.
Right. We wouldn't take away touch as a way of soothing
No.
ourselves. We would always offer a hug. We wouldn't judge that. We wouldn't try to get rid of it. But we do that with food. We demonize it.
Mm-hmm.
We demonize it.
Mm-hmm.
And that
Yeah.
is one of the biggest reasons why binge eating continues to be a problem for people is they demonize it and they don't actually understand the purpose that it's serving, whether it's binge eating or emotional eating. And so I can speak more about, the differences here in a second, but I just want to make sure that like that point really lands
Mm-hmm.
because that's a mindset shift that I think people need to be introduced to very early on.
Getting a new relationship with food, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's something that I've actually been applying over the last few years is getting a new relationship with food and kind of questioning my beliefs about food.
Yes. 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 Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with that 100%. And I often tell, my clients, and this is, 90% of my client population. I'm a private practice clinical psychologist. Um, And I tell them frequently, I say, those beliefs that you have about food and your body, they're not even yours.
That's so
You
true.
they're not even yours. Those are society's beliefs. They're your mother's beliefs, your father's, your
Mm-hmm.
grandmother's, your great grandmother's. They've been passed down to us within our genetics and within, society.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I always talk about like, I use the metaphor, the comparison of like those types of beliefs. Like I always treat them like this was a present I never wanted. It's like an ugly Christmas sweater that I never wanted to be gifted in the first place. I have no reason for having it, no purpose for it. It's not helping me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I'm like, give it back, give the
Mm-hmm.
gift back.
Right. Right.
And
Exactly.
buy your own gift essentially. So meaning change your beliefs, right?
Right.
And so it's not that simple, of course, but it is a starting framework. So
You know what somebody said to me one time, and at the time, I thought it was kind of an odd statement, but it's actually kind of helped me. And they said, "Just watch a skinny person eat,"
mm,
and it was in the text of how what their relationship is with food, right? And so I have done that. I have done that, and one of the biggest helps really is my husband because he does take care of himself and he works out and he's got muscle and he's careful, but he's got such a healthy relationship with food. He does indulge at times, but he also eats well and he watches what he eats and how much he eats. And so that's kind of what how I took that statement and I've actually embraced it and it's actually helped me, especially m- more now as I don't say foods are bad now. That's a good food, that's a bad food, right?
yes, absolutely. Yes. That's a huge part of it. That's a
Mhm.
huge part of it. In my world, we call that legalization of food.
Ah, yeah.
um,
Yeah.
right? And changing the all or bad or all or nothing, bad or good kind of
Right.
thinking mindset,
Right.
because it becomes a morality issue. Because
Mhm.
if you eat the quote unquote bad food, then what you're saying to yourself is, I'm a bad person,
Correct. Exactly.
right? And that tanks our self esteem and it actually leads to more binge eating,
It certainly does.
which
It
is a
certainly does.
vicious cycle,
Yep.
vicious cycle.
That's
So,
part of the cycle. Yes.
yes, it is. And so, but yeah, so if you want to speak, I can speak a little bit more about those differences for
Yes.
you, for the listeners. I want them to know there is a difference between binge eating
Definitely.
and emotional eating. We don't want to demonize either one, but I do want to kind of share the differences. And so, like, one of the biggest differences is that binge eating episodes are typically more frequent, they're more intense, they're more, quote, like severe.
Okay.
Okay.
Is it
And
like when you get
so,
triggered and you feel the need to sit down and binge? Well, I'll let you finish. I'll let you finish before I start asking questions.
yeah, I can go through a couple pieces here, and so like binge eating usually, well, one, it happens in much larger quantities. So
Oh,
for an
right.
example, like you could come home. Emotional eating might be like I had a bad day at work. I'm gonna have pizza for dinner. Typically, maybe you're a person who eats two pieces, so maybe you ate three pieces instead. right? It's like I ate a little past fullness because I'm just pissed off, and I apologize. I kind of curse a little bit. So
Oh, don't
just,
worry about it. Trust me.
okay.
No.
Okay. As long as your listeners are cool with that. Right. So maybe you eat a little bit extra, right? Because you're looking for some sort of like soothing of your nervous system.
Right.
Binge eating, a binge eater might be at work thinking about the two pizzas they're going to order when they get home from work.
Oh.
Binges are also planned a lot of times. Emotional eating is often not planned. And so
Okay.
the food preoccupation with a binge tends to almost last like all day. And so the person looks forward to it, and it's a lot more pizza. So maybe it's a whole pizza, pizza and a half, two pizzas. And the amount of food is not just larger, but it's also typically eaten quickly and with
Gulping
a
it down.
complete, yeah, gulping it down. And there's also this sense of losing control.
Oh, see, I didn't have that. I definitely had the emotional. Definitely had the
Yes.
emotional.
Yeah, and we're all emotional eaters, right? And so
Yeah.
if you think about like we use food to comfort people. So when someone passes away, what do? We bring them food.
We celebrate with food as well.
And we celebrate with food. We have a wedding, we have food. We have holidays, we have food. Food is innately emotional. And that's what I was talking about at the beginning, right? Of our
Yeah.
recording is like it's hardwired into us, and it's not a bad thing. It
It
becomes a problem if it's your only tool in the toolbox.
right, right, right. It's actually refreshing to hear that. For me
Yeah.
to
Yes.
know that because that would there's a lot of shame that I carried for many years about that. For me to be even talking about this is a lot. And it doesn't bother me at all at this point to talk about it. Oh God, there was just so much deep shame. And my weight fluctuated through the years, and it affected my health. And, I would put myself on a diet and I would lose weight and and it's just a cycle. Oh, yeah, the
Yeah.
shame.
It's a very difficult cycle. And, I had probably a maybe somewhat similar journey. And, like I grew up, in Indiana, and as a teen girl, it was like, why are my thighs bigger than everybody else? Right. And so it's like, let's diet, right? Let's
Yep.
start the diet, right? As a teenager. And then it quickly swung into like overeating and binging in college, because when you have years of dieting, inevitably it swings into overeating.
Right.
It
Yep.
backfires, right? So then the weight comes on. And then after college, I was like, I'm going to diet again. And then that's when I also stumbled into attuned eating when I went to graduate school. And it all kind of came together. And
Mm,
then I found my way hard fought through healing my relationship with food and
mm-hmm.
eating quote unquote like a normal person.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
so it's a complicated path though. So it can
Yeah.
take quite some time.
Yeah. Yeah. And stop dieting. That's what I had to
And
do. I just
stop dieting.
stop dieting.
Yes.
Seriously.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
no more
And
diet. It is honestly getting a new relationship with food and understanding food
yes.
and and yeah, knowledge is power. And I talk about that all the time and how helpful that is on my healing journey. And that's part of it is this is, learning about the difference between binge eating and emotional eating. I mean, I didn't even think about that there's two different things. Are
Yes.
they triggered by the same thing? Like, are they come from the same thing? They both come from childhood trauma, but it sounds like they have kind of the same kind of end result, right? It's some kind of way of comforting yourself, right?
Yes. Yeah. I would say it's a way that your nervous system is trying to regulate. And I can talk more about that. I would say like emotional eating can come from trauma. Um, it can also come, like you said earlier, from celebration.
Right.
Right? So a
Becomes
whole
habit.
host of different emotions. Yeah. Binge eating is typically coming from some sort of trauma response.
Mm,
And so I would say that is a big difference. And I would say also binge eating, like another big difference is like binge eaters typically eat in secret.
right.
You won't
Yeah,
find anybody binging truly in front of somebody else.
that's true. Because again, the
Um,
shame, right?
the
And
shame.
yeah,
Yep.
the shame that goes with that.
Yes. And the emotional aftermath is
Hmm.
typically followed by disgust, regret,
Yes.
shame, and guilt. And we don't always have that with emotional eating. We might have like a, oh man, I wish I wouldn't have eaten that extra slice of pizza,
Yeah.
like that, kind of sucks. But like, there's none of this like massive upheaval of like, oh my gosh, what did I just do? And self-loathing that you
Right.
typically see.
Right.
So
Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
hopefully
Sorry.
that helps kind of explain the difference as
That's
far
a
as like,
big
it's just
difference.
big difference, big
That's a big
difference.
difference. And I was thinking for me, one of the things that I realized in getting this new relationship is part of mine was habit.
Yeah.
Part of mine was habit and I remember as like literally I was 13 years old, right? And it's evening time. I've already had dinner, so I'm not hungry. But then the eating starts until I go to bed. Go eat chips, go eat ice cream. And it's just this constant kind of like grazing until I would go to bed. And so nobody stopped me, right? And nobody told me, hey, that's not, that's not healthy to do. And so part of it was habit. And so I just literally took that into my adult life. And that is something I absolutely have broke. And I think back on that, like, why did I do that? Because I was not, there's no way I was hungry. Like, how did I do that? To, and it's not a judge. Well, I guess it does sound like a judgment on myself. I'm not trying to sound judgmental, but it's like, it feels so awful to do that now. And that's how I shut it down, that I know I probably felt really crappy, right? But I didn't even know it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that you said, you were about 13
Mm-hmm.
or so. Yeah. So the thing that I would say to like your 13-year-old self was, you were doing the best you could
Yeah.
in that moment, right? Like, you were doing the best you can with what
Yep.
you had to work with as a 13-year-old girl.
Yep.
Right. And so one of the antidotes to binge eating is self-compassion.
Yeah.
Well, many antidotes, but it's a big one. It's
That's
kind of
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
right.
that's
It's
a
like
big one. That's kind of
it's
a
a
hidden
big
one.
one.
Yeah.
It's a hidden one, right? It's
Yeah.
not. I always tell my clients, I'm like, look, self-compassion isn't sexy. It doesn't sell.
That's so true. That's true. It's not sexy.
Right? People do not come to therapy with me for self-compassion, right? They're like, I want to end my binge eating.
Right.
That's what they come to therapy for.
Right.
I also have like an online course and program that has like a lot of different levels of support too, all for binge and emotional eating. And so, but no one ever signs up for my course and my group program for self-compassion, but it's built into every single step
Right.
because it's one of the biggest things that rewires someone's brain.
Correct.
We have to find a
Absolutely.
new language. Absolutely. So I guess the other thing I'll say, like, the difference between emotional and binge eating is control, right? It's when we're
Um,
eating with binge eating, there's lack of control.
yeah.
Just it's all over the place. And emotional eating, it's usually we know we're doing it and there's some level of control. And so I will tell my clients, like, binge eating kind of feels like a runaway train. Emotional eating feels like a speed bump.
Lots of speed bumps.
Lots of speed, and they can happen a lot, but it's not like deterring the whole
Right.
kind of course of your evening. And
Right.
it also does happen typically at night.
Well, because you can do it in secret then, right?
That I think that's a big part of it. And then, like, you were speaking about like habit earlier,
Right.
right? And that's common too, which is like, I don't feel particularly stressed or anxious or upset or lonely. Why am I still eating?
Right.
And a lot of times that comes down to the neural pathways in our brain, and that they're just wired, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
like, as soon as I turn on the TV, my mouth immediately starts salivating for Doritos, right? Like,
Yes.
it's that wired connection,
Right. That makes
right?
sense.
Yep. And so we also have to kind of break some of those wires down. And I think one of the ways I tell my clients to do this, and I tell them, I was like, you're going to look at me like I'm disgusting. And that's okay. I'm here for that. But I'll tell them one of the best ways to break this wire, to at least kind of look at this wire differently, is at night before you decide to eat your food. I want you to decide to eat it in a different place.
Oh.
So if you're a client of mine and you're eating in front of the TV
Mm-hmm.
or in your bed, I will say, I want you to go get we'll stick with Doritos because that's what I've been using, or chips or whatever else. I'll
That's
say,
my
please
weakness.
go, right, go get your chips. And I want you to go to the bathroom and sit on the toilet and eat your Doritos.
Which I won't
That,
do.
which I won't do.
I won't
Right.
do.
Or go to the backyard or go somewhere else. Right.
That
And
makes
so
sense.
it just shakes things up.
Right.
Right.
Because what happens is in that place of habit is mindless eating. You're not
Yeah.
even paying attention. So instead of eating, a handful of Doritos, you're eating half the bag or more because you're not
Yes.
even. I'm speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for everybody else. I'm going to speak for me and my experience with it. And that's exactly what it is. It's next thing I know, I look down and half the bag is gone. What happened? I didn't even
Yes.
realize I did that.
Yes. And usually like with binge eating too, where it's typically paired with some other sort of distraction.
Mm,
And so sometimes clients will have, a lot of, like they don't want to like break that connection. There's no point in binging if they can't also scroll on their phone or play a video game or watch a TV show, right? And that's where we have to understand the binge eating at a deeper level.
right.
We have to understand what it's actually trying to help that person with. And
Yeah.
so, but for my clients who are open to it, if it's more of a habit thing, they are more open to like, okay, I'll put my chips in a bowl. I'll leave my phone in the living room and I
Yes.
will go into the backyard and I will mindfully using techniques that, Jessica taught me, I will go and sit and eat my chips. And often that's enough to kind of break that connection and at least get some more mindfulness behind it.
Yeah. That's a great tool and it is so simple. I mean, I wish I would have thought of that because that makes complete sense that you're not just going through the same ritual, the same habit, you're breaking it. Because it kind of reminds me, this is terrible. I quit smoking cigarettes.
Hmm.
Oh gosh, it's been over 30 years. Well, probably 36 years or so, right? And when I did it, one of the things that they did, and it was, I don't even know if they're still around, it's called Smoke Enders. And you go to this class for 6 weeks. You go once a week and you go to the class. And every week you're changing the habit as well as lowering the nicotine. So what we would do is we would find a cigarette. So for the next week, we would find a cigarette that has a lower nicotine than the one we're currently smoking. And we had to do things like, for instance, um, like a habit obviously is smoking a cigarette right after you eat, right? We had to wait 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And so
Delaying the
and then every
urge.
week they would enlarge that time frame to where pretty soon you couldn't even, it would be an hour after you ate dinner before you could have a cigarette. And you got the nicotine level so low that at the 6 week mark, when you finally quit, it was easier than just cold turkey. Although this girl here had every single side effect, withdrawal, you name it. I had everything. But it's kind of that same mentality. It's breaking the mind, without thinking, just the habit of the cigarette, as well as the physical, in this case, the physical addiction to it as well. So that's what I was kind of thinking of is it's kind of that breaking that doing stuff without thinking. Hey, thank you for listening so far. If you're enjoying this podcast, be sure to subscribe so you won't ever miss an episode.
Yes. Yeah. And just like the mindless eating and because it's food is so complicated,
It is, and
right?
we
Like
have to have it.
so and you and this is where it's different than drugs and alcohol and
Right.
cigarettes, because we don't have to have any of those things to survive. We have to eat. We have to eat. And
Mm-hmm.
therefore we have to find a way to incorporate it into our life that has integrity and respect for our body.
Right. Right.
And food is never the enemy. I always tell them food is not the enemy, but disconnection from your body is an enemy.
Yeah. And that's what we do,
And,
right?
and the real culprit behind that is diet culture, right? Of
Oh
course,
God.
like it all goes back to diet culture,
So yeah.
and especially for women. Not
Mm-hmm.
saying men are not affected by it; they absolutely are. It does look a little bit different for women, though.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. I've been on so many diets. I can't even begin to tell you. I will never be
Yeah,
on a diet again.
yeah. I mean, diets. Long term. Like I think the most recent statistic is like 95 to 98% of diets fail, meaning that after that statistic means like I think after 1 year people gain the weight back,
Mm-hmm. And more.
and then one and more because your body is like freaked out by what you did, so it's going to add on a little bit of excess to protect it for next time. And what people also don't seem to understand about that is like every time we do that, we're messing up our metabolism.
Yes.
And so the metabolic health then takes a hit every single time.
Mm-hmm.
And so when people do stop binge eating and it drastically decreases, what I'll also hear is, but why am I not losing weight?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not that simple, because your body has been in a state of trauma for
Right.
years.
Yep.
For years. Your body does not trust you, and you don't trust
Oh,
your body.
wow. Is that true? Wow, that's a strong statement, and it's so true.
Yeah. And again, that's not sexy, right? That doesn't
Mm-hmm.
sell. Like, let me reconnect you to your body signal, right? But that's what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
If you truly want to work on binge eating, you have to give up on weight loss. And that is a strong statement. And I'm going to
It
put it out
is.
there. And I know people have feelings about that. And they're like, I don't want to. I want to lose weight. And what I tell people is like, the more you focus on weight loss, the more your binge part of your brain rebels, and the more you're going to binge.
Mm-hmm.
People do lose weight after they stop binge eating. Not all people, I don't guarantee that,
Right,
but
right.
I know that people do. I'm one of those people. I'm one of those people, and my
Mm-hmm.
weight has stayed really consistent, for about, well, after I had my last son in 2020. It stayed very consistent, but it's not that simple if you have 20, 30, 40, 50 years of dieting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have to work on the relationship with your body in order
Yeah,
to
with
heal the
yourself.
relationship with food in
Mm-hmm.
order to lose weight. And so it's definitely a process.
I know, one of the things that's so freeing is that I can look at food now and I don't have that, oh, I can't have that. And I've got to eat the, you know, flavorless broccoli. I like broccoli, but I don't like it steamed. And so I fix it. It's still healthy. It's not as healthy probably as eating steamed, but I'm willing to take that chance. I'm still getting the good nutrition in my body, but it's got flavor.
Yeah.
I want
Oh,
to enjoy
yes.
it.
Absolutely. I sat with a client this morning, and I said the phrase like, we never ever plan a meal. We're talking about meal planning, right? We never ever plan a meal that you don't want to eat.
Mm, I like
It's a
that rule.
it's a guaranteed way of being in the pantry or the fridge later that night. Because if you deny
Not
your
satisfied.
body what it's wanting in the first place, it's gonna win. Your
Yeah.
body is very smart, right?
Yes.
And it will win. And so eventually that is why we call it rebellion. We have like a rebel part. I personally call it my screw it part, where it's like, screw it, eat whatever I want, right? Like, you haven't fed me what I want all day, then I'll just eat what I want,
Yeah.
right? And those paths then kind of collide inside of us.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So both emotional eating can is something we all deal with, but it can also get exacerbated with trauma.
Yes.
But binge eating, that does come from trauma. That's very different, right?
So binge eating is definitely different. And the latest statistic that I'm aware of is that 83% of people with binge eating disorder also report a history of childhood mistreatment.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to be physical abuse or sexual abuse. For a lot of times with binge eating, it comes from being in a household where parents were emotionally unavailable.
Oh,
And that makes it actually really complicated because, a lot of times people grow up with parents who were fine parents in the sense that they provided food and a
right.
roof over the head and money, and but they didn't actually spend time with the child,
Mm-hmm.
or they didn't actually see the child, or the child just didn't get the attention
Mm-hmm.
that they needed. They didn't get the positive reinforcement. And so that also falls into the category of like childhood mistreatment.
Yeah. Yeah. Which was
And
traumatic for
so,
them. It was their
which is
perception.
true.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you're familiar with, I'm sure you are with your podcast, right? Like big trauma, big T, little t trauma, right? Those
Mm-hmm.
concepts, right?
Yes.
And so it doesn't take a big T trauma to end up with binge eating disorder.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the trauma aspect, but then also there's the history of dieting beforehand. That
Oh.
is a massive risk factor. And so, if you have a history of yo yo dieting, that is a massive risk factor to set you up for binge eating disorder.
Oh, thank God I didn't get that.
Yeah.
So is the treatment the same for a binge eater and an emotional eater? I know, is it getting to the root of the trauma or the reason why they're eating? Or is binge eating something like an eating disorder, or is that different? Where an eating disorder,
So
you might need to be, hospitalized or something.
So what's
Right?
interesting about, binge eating disorder is it's in the DSM-5,
Okay.
which is, what I call like the psychological Bible of
Bible, right.
disorders,
Yeah.
right? And I'm not fond of that in the first place. In general, I really the labels,
Yeah.
But what I will say, like binge eating disorder is often not covered by health insurance,
Gosh.
which is is not treated like anorexia or bulimia. It was just added to the DSM-5. It was not in the DSM-4, I believe. I'd have to double check that. But we tend to, for binge eating, we tend to continue to blame the person. And there's nothing worse you can tell a binge eater than just stop eating.
Oh, yeah.
It's like
If it was
telling an
only that
anxious
simple.
person to calm down,
Yeah,
right? We all
exactly.
know how well that works, and it doesn't work. And so treatment, you know, treatment is different. And I kind of even hesitate to say that we treat emotional eating. I almost like with emotional eating, I'm like, well, let's understand it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just at a very different level. Binge eating typically takes some trauma work and some inner child work. And so there
Mm,
is definitely a more kind of therapeutic place for it.
right, right. Because
And
it
so,
sounds like it goes deeper. It sounds like it goes much deeper
yes. And,
and
and it's so much
complicated.
more prevalent. Like it's 3 times more common than all other eating disorders combined.
Seriously?
Yep. Oh, yeah. Yep. Yeah. And another, binge eating also affects people of all shapes and sizes.
Hmm.
And so all shapes and sizes. And absolutely, I've got clients who are in larger bodies who are binge eaters, and I've got clients who are in smaller bodies and they're binge eaters. And
You
so it's a big myth that it only affects people in larger bodies.
that, yeah, I'm glad you said that. And I think about like when I was in high school, I didn't know anybody who binge ate or who was anorexic or bulimic. Is it something that's more common now, or was it just hidden more then?
I was gonna say, I bet you did, Lisa.
And didn't know it. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, yes, I bet you did. Because like you were saying earlier, like shame is so pervasive,
Hmm.
so pervasive. We don't talk about it. We'll talk about dieting,
Oh yeah. Oh
but we
yeah.
we don't talk about binge eating. And so
Yeah.
there's so much shame with it, um, that I think it's much more common than people realize. And even when, I mean, people come to treatment with me for binge eating, and it's still hard to talk about.
There's so much shame. It goes so deep.
There's so much
It
shame.
it it, it, it
Absolutely.
it's like it becomes their identity, and it's hard to
Yeah.
separate that, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
And that can be a big part of it because usually binge eating, starts earlier in life.
yeah.
It starts earlier in life and it does become part of the identity. And so you've got a part of you that has been binge eating for years and it's serving a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And with binge eating, there's ambivalence about giving it up. It's not uncommon for a binge eater for a binge eater to say, yeah, I do want to give this up. It's making me miserable. I hate it. It's ruining my life.
But
But another part of them is like, no,
yeah. What is
can't
that?
do it.
Because that's so true. What is that? Because there is something to that, and I know I've experienced that in my life as well. That this thing that I'm doing, I hate it. I don't want to do it. I'm miserable, but I don't want to give it up. What is that?
Are you familiar with internal family systems? Have
A
you
little
ever
bit.
heard of IFS? Yeah.
I've heard of
Okay.
it.
Okay. And so IFS was actually created by Richard Schwartz, for eating disorders.
Oh,
And so, yeah, he's got some good work. But anyway, like I won't get into all the details with IFS. It is a modality of treatment that I use with my clients and so forth.
okay.
But it's about understanding our internal parts of ourselves. We all have different parts and pieces, right? Have you ever had the experience of like, well, one part of me wants to go to the party, but another part wants to stay home and watch
Yes.
Netflix? Right?
Yes.
That's what I'm talking about, right? We all have different parts and pieces inside of ourselves. But when we bring it back to eating, we have one part of us that says, no, 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 you don't need those cookies. You don't need those cookies. What are you doing? Those cookies aren't going to make you feel better. And then you have another part of you, kind of like the angel and the devil on your shoulder,
Yes.
right? And you have another
Mm-hmm.
part that's like, no, girl, you deserve those cookies.
Yes.
You know, your day was hard. Your kids are screaming, like, you know, you haven't felt well. Like, you deserve those cookies,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe it's more of an emotional eater part. Maybe it's more of a binge eater part, right? And the binge eater part typically is more of a numbing part. It is a
Oh,
part that just it doesn't necessarily try to soothe you or distract you. It pretty much just wants you numbed out.
okay. That's interesting.
And so it's a deeper level. And this is also why
Mm-hmm.
you'll hear like for true binge eaters, they're not present when they're eating.
Yeah, I
They
could see
don't
that.
know, right? They don't know how much they've eaten. You
Right.
know, all of a sudden, like they come back to the surface and the package of Oreos is empty, right? And I will happen, right? And so disassociation can also be common with binge eating because that's also that connection to trauma.
Right.
And so we are just trying to numb the hell out of
Right.
whatever trauma response our body is going through.
Shut that thing up. And so we're stuffing it with food and
Yeah.
we're lost in that because that's what we're focused on. We're trying to shut that thing up, whatever is stirred up in us. And then we're lost in it. And then we come back and then we've eaten, like you
And
said, the whole
the,
thing of Oreo
the,
cookies and you
yeah,
feel terrible.
and the shame,
Oh
right?
God.
And it's a mix of pleasure and pain too. That's also what makes binge eating complicated is while you're eating, you know, people will typically experience like pleasure
Yeah. Right.
in some sort of way, but they're also experiencing more and more pain.
So they go
And so
more.
those signals can get, yeah, they can get twisted in your brain, they get intermixed, like interwoven, and it gets very then complicated the next time the urge to binge comes along.
I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your comments, your questions about this episode or really anything that has to do with trauma. So you can comment below or you can reach out to me at asklisatickle@gmail.com. I'd really looking forward to hearing from you.
And you know, another thing that adds more complication on top of it is binge eating works. Like it quote unquote works for coping.
That's
Um,
true.
Scientifically, like so we know that binge eating in the short term reduces cortisol, which is our stress hormone.
Mm, that
We
creates a
also know
problem.
that creates a problem. I mean, we also know that like when your dopamine goes up when you're binging, right? You got that sense of pleasure and escape. And then also another thing I talk about with my clients is the hunger hormone, ghrelin. And ghrelin is linked to stress and trauma.
Okay.
So when your body is stressed, or like when you have high levels of ghrelin, you know, it makes the brain more vulnerable to traumatic stress. All right. So it makes food seem like an even more appealing coping mechanism. And so it kind of goes both ways. So like when your ghrelin is high, your brain's like, oh, carbs.
Mm-hmm.
Carbs make serotonin. Serotonin makes our mood better. Let's go
Oh,
find carbs.
interesting.
And so there's a lot of science behind it. And it's something that's fascinating is, you know, the joke is like when women are premenstrual, right? They're looking
Mm-hmm.
for chocolate, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what everyone says. There is a scientific reason why your body is looking for chocolate.
There's a chemical in it that your body needs, right?
Yeah. So our serotonin naturally dips for women when we're premenstrual. Our
Mm-hmm.
serotonin goes down. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter that keeps your mood more stable
Mm-hmm.
and more positive. And so, because our serotonin dips, our body says, hey, our serotonin's a little bit low. Let's get a little extra serotonin in us. And one of the fastest ways we get serotonin in our system is through carbohydrates.
Mm. There you go. There it
Yeah.
is.
So it's very nerdy, it's very sciencey, but I do believe that like understanding the science behind it helps people not demonize this
Exactly.
act, right? They need to
Exactly.
understand.
Yeah, it's
There's
understanding. It's the whole thing that I was saying earlier. Like, I know for me, one of the biggest helps on my healing journey is understanding and is learning and understanding trauma and all the nuances and the effects of it, and why our bodies do what they do, why our minds do what they do. And there's an empowerment, because there's a couple things for me. One, I realize I'm not a weirdo, because that's the way I used to always think about myself. I'm the only one in the world that feels this way. And so that's the number one thing. Let me see if I can think of the other thing, because my mind just drifted off on me, which it happens to do. um but yeah, anyway, I'll get to the point when I think of it again. But
it's fine.
I
I
sometimes
do it
do
all the
this.
time.
I get so wrapped up in what
All
you're
the time.
I get wrapped up in what
Right.
you're saying, and then I lose it.
Well, that's another thing, by the way. Binge eating overlaps with neurodivergence.
Oh,
It's about a 30% overlap between ADHD and binge eating, for example.
interesting. And I know it's true that there's a lot of crossovers between the behaviors of ADHD and someone that has got trauma. So there's one of them.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. And it's, the pathways in the brain are all kind of interconnected in some ways. There's issues with some emotional regulation and impulsivity,
Mm-hmm.
and so forth. And so I think we're just now beginning to like tip of the iceberg with
Right.
some research on like
Right.
the mingling between all of it. Because I mean, trauma is a type of neurodivergence, ADHD, autism, OCD,
Right.
like they're all connected in some ways.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we really are just scratching the surface. And I hope that they do more research and understand this more, because, even in the last 15 years, there's just been so much that we've learned about trauma, so much that we understand. And it's so encouraging that, we can learn to manage our trauma rather than it managing us and it controlling us and consuming us, because I know that's what it was for me. So I think we're going to find out so much more. And the whole eating thing is so interesting. And yeah, anyway.
It absolutely is, and I would say like for the overlap between binge eating, definitely binge eating in particular, sometimes emotional eating, but definitely binge eating with trauma is the part of you that wants to binge eat is trying to soothe your inner child,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
It's trying to soothe that child part. So if you grew up as a kid in an environment where there was chaos all the way around you,
Mm-hmm.
food became the way to create safety, right? So
Right.
maybe you went to your bedroom with a bag of chips,
Yep.
right? And you created safety and predictability. Or if you grew up in a household where you were lonely,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you're just nobody really paid attention to you. You know who is always there?
Food.
Food.
It's always my
Food.
friend.
Always your friend. It's always there. It's constant. It's a great companion. It never talks back. Doesn't
Mm-hmm.
judge you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it becomes like a replacement in that way. And so when we well, and then another part also, another theme that I think is important is when you feel powerless as a kid. If you grew
Yes.
up in an environment where you felt very powerless, very helpless, binge eating can also become a way of like rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
It's taking your power back.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, screw you, I'll do what I want. Right? Like, so like when a part of your brain says, oh, you don't really need those Oreos, you don't need those cookies, you're not hungry, then the binge part is like, screw you, you can't tell, Jessica
Mm-hmm.
what to do. She can eat as many Oreos as she wants, right? She deserves it, right? And so those parts like to go head to head.
I had all of
And
those.
so yes, and that's what I mean when I say it's like you need to understand that your binge part has been trying to help you for a very long time. Sometimes it's not the most helpful,
No, no.
right?
It helps in a
But
moment.
it helps in a moment. But before we try to get rid of that part, we need to understand that part. And so I
Yeah.
always use the two of the C words, curiosity and compassion.
Yes.
So first you get curious about the part, and then you get compassionate with the part.
Yes. Yep. You were talking about the inner child is crying out. And I think it just reminded me, I think one of the things that really did help me with my emotional eating was working on the inner child, doing the inner child work. And it's interesting. I've shared this on my podcast before. So I was doing EMDR, and we worked on little Lisa. So, like 7, 8-year-old Lisa. Teenage Lisa had a very different type of abuse. There was a lot more that happened in the teenage years. And so I did that one a little bit different. So I did the little Lisa through EMDR, but I've worked with the teenage Lisa through validating her through a letter. It was really interesting. So I just wrote her a letter, and it was the adult Lisa talking to teenage Lisa. And it was like, oh, do you remember when mom did this? It made me feel terrible. And then the adult Lisa would say, you're right. I understand. Like validating her. That wasn't fair. That shouldn't have happened. You're right. And you weren't heard. I just read that letter because it's on my computer. It's powerful. It is so
Yeah.
powerful to do.
And that's a lot of like IFS work.
Oh, is
You're
it?
working with it is. Yep. It is. It's you're working with the parts of yourself. And I like binge eating is typically what I call like a teen part. It's an angsty teen.
Yeah.
And it's fiercely protective of your
Yes.
inner child. Where it's like little Lisa, 7-year-old Lisa doesn't need to be in pain anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so like we don't want her in pain, and we'll do anything to get her out of pain. And perhaps food is the only way we know.
That's a great way to put it. That's so true. That's exactly what it feels like too.
Yeah.
Teenage Lisa is protecting little Lisa. And
Yep.
it was interesting in EMDR because what kind of broke it for her, we were doing one of the EMDR what would you call it, like
Like one of like the eye movement
yeah, the eye
exercises
movement.
or
Yeah, we
like,
were doing one of those, and my therapist had said, when you go in, let little Lisa tell her mom, because I was talking to my mom at the time, tell her mom what it is that she wants to say. And immediately the little Lisa in me rose up and said, oh no, 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 I can't do that. And
yeah.
she's like, why? I said, oh, I'll get in trouble. Oh no, I can't do that. So what she had me do, this was powerful. She said, why don't you come alongside her? And it worked. And little Lisa was, with respect, got to say to her mom and her dad and everybody else that, at the time, what she really felt. And it was really powerful. And her little voice was finally heard. And she was
It is.
respectful. Teenage Lisa, not so much, but little Lisa was. Teenage Lisa has a bit of a mouth on her.
And she should. That's
Yeah.
her role. That's her
Yeah.
role, right? Like and so forth. But like, yeah, so like with IFS, we believe in the concept of like true self. Capital T, capital S, right? True self, right? And so we talk about like stepping into like self-led energy, right?
Mm,
And so I say to my clients is like it's time to come into self. How do we access self to do the work that we need to do, right?
yeah.
And so I also use the like kind of just the visual of like a conference room table,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so like you are in charge of you, right? We all
Yes.
have a true self. You're at the head of the conference room table. Meanwhile, you have all these parts sitting around the table. They all have different needs. They all have different desires. They all have different jobs.
Mm-hmm.
You're, as you know, in true self, your job is to hear the different parts, but they don't make decisions for you.
Right.
Right?
Right.
They can't
Right.
they can't make all your choices for you. That would
But
be
you
like
have to
letting a
hear.
child
Right.
make all the decisions in the
Right.
family,
Right. But you want to hear
right?
from them. You want to hear what they
That
have to
you
say.
have to hear them. The more you ignore them, the louder and often angrier they
Yeah.
get.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the more you hate on a binge part, the more it binges.
Ooh, it's good you said that. That's
Yeah.
so true.
Yeah. So the more we hate on the part, the louder the part gets. It's a very much, it's kind of like a child, right? Like the more you
Mm-hmm.
ignore a child, they're going to get louder.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to get louder.
They want to be heard.
They're going to, they want to be heard, right? And they all have a story to tell. And so we don't want to fight a part. We don't want to demonize a part. We don't want to demonize the binge eating. We want you to realize the binge eating is not about food, and it's never been about food. It's been about creating safety, a sense of control, or escape when life just becomes too much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm.
And so
Interesting.
we need to kind of let that sink in. I mean, food is the one thing that is typically been safe and consistent
Mm-hmm. And always
for
there for
many
you.
people binge eating. Always there.
Always
Yeah.
there. Yeah. Oh, and it's interesting because I didn't binge eat, but there were some of the temperaments that kind of went with it, or some of the, like eating in secret, hiding the empty bag, right? I'd finish off a bag of chips and then I would go out in the trash can and bury it way down into the trash can. So there's a little bit of that.
Yeah. And it's not clear cut. It's muddy,
Yeah, it
right?
is
It's
muddy.
muddy. It's muddy and it doesn't need to be a clear cut,
Yeah,
right? I think as humans, we try to put things in boxes.
yeah,
And in reality, it's like, yeah, I dabbled with binge eating and I dabbled with emotional eating. And I dabbled with intuitive eating at times, right? Like
yeah,
it's like
yeah,
where humans are messy, and that's great.
yeah,
We should be messy.
yeah.
Like
It's not a
we
clear
should be
line.
messy.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I like that. Oh, this has been really good. And I honestly, I never even thought about the difference between emotional and binge eating, but there is a big difference. There's a big difference.
Yes, there
And
is.
you
And so,
really, especially with binge eating, you really do need to have some therapy because you need to have a support system to help you work that. That's not easy.
yeah, I think there's like much deeper layers of exploration,
Yeah,
and having a licensed professional, someone who's trained.
correct.
And I also like, I really want to emphasize to your listeners, if you are going through any sort of eating disorder, whether it's binge eating or anorexia or anything like that, please, 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 please find a therapist who has training and expertise and experience with
Hmm.
eating disorders, because so many therapists are wonderful, wonderful therapists. But if you're not trained,
Yeah,
unfortunately, more harm than good can come to you.
that's
So,
true.
yeah,
Yeah. It's like trauma
absolutely.
therapy. You need trauma therapy.
Yes.
Talk therapy has its place and it's very
Yes.
important. But when it comes to trauma, you absolutely need a trauma therapist to help you get through it because you need to get it out of your body and out of your subconscious. You need someone to help you through that. That's not just talking it out, there's modalities that are needed.
Yeah. Logic hasn't, I mean, binge eating and trauma really just don't respond to logic.
No.
It's body work. As I tell my clients, I'm like, it's body work, baby. Like whether we like it or not, like
Yeah.
we have to get in there and do the thing,
Yeah.
and we have to heal your body.
Yeah. Exactly. This has been so fascinating, Dr. Jessica. Thank you so much.
You're so
Um,
welcome.
and I always ask my my guests this one last question. What do you want to leave our listeners with?
It's such a good question. Maybe two things.
Yeah, it could be two
Maybe
things.
two things. Number one, willpower is not the answer.
Mm,
It's not about willpower or self control.
no.
That is not the cure to binge eating, and it never has been. It never will be. And then going along with that, number two is it's not your fault.
Yeah.
It's not your fault. It can be changed. We can learn how to change it. There's always hope. Find yourself somebody who reach out to me. I've got colleagues across, well,
Mm-hmm.
I've got colleagues actually across the world, but I've got a lot of colleagues here in the States. So if you need help finding a therapist in your state, reach out to me. I'll try my best to hook you up, but like find somebody who can help. So it's not your fault, and do not rely on willpower or self control to change
No,
your eating. It's a recipe for disaster.
it just gets worse. It really does. I've tried it.
100%.
Yeah, it gets
Yep.
worse. Well, and with that said, why don't you share with the listeners how they can reach out to you? We'll have it in the show notes, but why don't you let them know how, if they wanted to reach
Sure.
out to you, how they could get a hold of you?
Sure. So you can find me kind of across the web. So my website is peacefulpresencepsych.com. Kind of a mouthful there. And so I always joke that like I am a peaceful presence and I'm also super chaotic at the same time. So I chose the name with a bit of irony. So it's peacefulpresencepsych.com. On my site, you can learn more about me. You can also learn about the work I do with binge eating, and emotional eating, as well as my online course. My online course is the Finding Food and Body Freedom Formula. It's exclusively for women. It comes with one-on-one time with me, group support, and an online community, and lots of other cool things. So you can learn more about that. I'm on Instagram at Finding Food and Body Freedom. I'm also on Facebook. Just you can just search my name, Jessica Newkam-Helms, and you can get my profile. And I also run a free Facebook community for binge and emotional eating for
Oh,
women. I typically post in there about 5 times a week, and I share free resources.
ooh, I'll have to
So
get on there. I'll have to check that out.
yeah,
Cool.
so
Well, thank you
absolutely.
so much for everything. And thank you for giving us a lot of clarity and me, of course, a lot of clarity as well. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome. If it helps one person today, um, I guess outside of you, Lisa, because you obviously count as a person, but if it's one of your listeners, right? Like it's absolutely worth it. And
Yeah.
so, absolutely, thank you for having me. Truly.
Hmm.